Cool. All right, so my topic today is virtual reality in hospitality and tourism. So mainly, I will talk about the three research projects recently I engaged in related to applying virtual reality in hotel settings and also in tourism marketing setting. And hopefully it will engage some of you or inspire some of you to also do some studies in this area. And thank you for the introductions from Dr. Khu. Also let me introduce a little bit about myself. Mm-hmm. I had some work experience from 5-star hotels, 3 5-star hotels, and covering those front of the house, which is from the rooms division manager, divisions, and also back of the house experience, which is I work for also marketing departments as well. After I get my master and PhD degree from Cornell universities, I actually first worked for Chinese University of Hong Kong. And that experience actually inspired me one of the projects that I would discuss with you later. Mm-hmm. And then after a couple of years, my parents missed me, so I moved back to Taiwan and joined Minchuan universities. And one of the projects was based on a teaching hotel in Minchuan University. And then I moved to National Taiwan Normal University last year. And my research interest, as Dr. Khu mentioned, was in hospitality management, strategic information systems, and virtual reality. So I published my paper pretty much half and half between information system journals and hospitality management journals. Mm-hmm. So in the hospitality side, one stream of my research is doing online review response strategies. So we actually scrape TripAdvisor's review from and then conduct some text analysis, and then study how management's response affects hotels' performance. And some of the very interesting strategic information system projects that I involved in will be more related to evaluating the business value of information systems. So for example, how does personalization systems in hotels enable superior customer service? Or how does a piece of self-service technology create value for hotels as well? But today, what I would like to talk about is these three research projects that the first one is related to training. So how do we create a virtual environment that resemble a real hotel situation, and then we use it as a channel to provide training to our students. And this paper was just actually published earlier in Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Technology. And then I will also talk about a study on enhancing marine sustainability tourism through virtual reality. And this is a early result of a larger research project, and we present this preliminary results in international conference on responsible tourism and hospitality last month, actually only. All right. And then the third project that I will share is how do we use virtual reality to market tourism experience? And we submit this paper to Enter 2023. And Enter is a conference that's merged technology and hospitality together. And we submit the paper there because next January, is going to be hosted in South Africa. And
so you're gonna go Johannesburg?
Probably.
Okay, let's meet at Johannesburg.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So this study, even though these three papers was published or was presented in conference recently, but my research interests in virtual reality actually started very early on. My first paper related to virtual reality was actually back in 2008. And that was about like 15 years ago. And I was still a PhD student at that time, and was Jean. And as a way to release my pressure from PhD life, and I believe some of you are currently experiencing it, is I like to play computer games. So that's how I get involved in virtual reality.
Oh,
All right, so before we start, let me clarify some of the terms, and especially after metaverse become a very hot topic on research recently, people has been talking about virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, and recently there's a new term called extended reality. So I would like to present this continuum between reality and virtuality. On one extreme, the real environment we're currently in is toward all the way toward the left-hand sides. So all the things we see and touch is are physical objects. And toward the other extreme, which is the focus of today's study, is virtual environment. So once you, for example, wear the helmets, or head-mount displays of virtual realities, all the things you see are digital objects or virtual objects. And in between, we have a mix of real objects and digital objects, which could be augmented reality or augmented virtuality, and these are all under this umbrella of mixed reality, depending on how much components within how much components of virtual reality that you blend into the real objects or real world that you're seeing, and how much interactions you have with the physical, with the digital objects that you're viewing. And virtual reality has been, has took off very quickly, and especially after COVID-19, a lot of people were locked down in their house, so gaming become one of the entertainment that they engage in. So there were a lot more virtual reality headsets sold during the past 2.5 years, and it was expected to grow also very, very quickly. And not only in gaming industry, we have also seen a lot of applications in military and trainings and education as well. All right, so the formal definition, or in some of the research paper, virtual reality is defined as a computer technology that replicates an environment. It could be a real environment, which you will see in my presentation, that we actually built the virtual contents based on a real hotel to scale. So you're actually totally mimicking a real environment and either using it for marketing purpose or educational purpose. Or it can be a fake environment, for example, a theme park that you imagine. And in that sense, when you build the virtual content, it has to be computer graphics. So if you build a virtual content based on a real environment, there are two ways you can build the virtual environment. One is through 360 camera that you capture the environment and then you showcase to the users through head-mount displays. But if you're creating an imagined environment, which does not exist in our physical world, then you have to rely on computer graphics to build this virtual content. And you will also see an example in our study as well. All right, so when you replicate environments, another key characteristic of virtual reality is the immersive experience. So the user feel that they are actually physically present in that environment. And when the users were in that simulated environments, in some situation, you will allow users to interact with the digital objects in the environment. And in general, there are actually many different output types nowadays, and from very, very cheap type, a Google Cardboard, which costs only $310 US dollars, to a very, very expensive headset that could easily cost more than 1,000 US dollar. So I have an HTC Vive and an HTC Vive Pro, which I mainly use for my research. I also, other than HTC Vive Pro, which require a connection to a PC in order to work, recently, actually not recently, since 2016, there are also a lot of VR outputs through a standalone machine. So the very famous one would be Oculus. So this is a standalone machine. It does not require connection to the computer. The benefit of it is portability. So it's easier to bring it to other places to display to people. But in terms of computing capability, it's more limited. Therefore, the content that you're presented through a standalone machine would be, for example, restricted compared to the devices that you have to utilize a PC. Right, so those are all different types of head-mount displays that you view the virtual content through this headsets. There are also other type of outputs. For example, in one of the hospitals in Taiwan, they actually built a room, and then they cover the 4 walls of the rooms with screens, and they project the image of the operating room on the screen. So when you walk into that room, it's not a typical classroom. It feels like you're in an operating room. So you can also put screens around in a physical environment to sort of simulate that presence experience as in other places. And because of that different type of outputs, we classified VR into 3 different types. On the left-hand side is fully immersive simulations, which is the typical people's concept about VR. So you wear VR headsets and headphones, and sometimes maybe gloves or vests to simulate touching, feelings of touching. Most of this fully immersive simulation was used in, has been used in gaming industry. In the middle one is a semi-immersive simulation. So there are part of the scene that you see are virtual. In this example, it's a pilot training simulator, which the view that the pilot sees through the window, it's a virtual environment, but all the dashboard in front of the pilots are real objects. So this type, we call it semi-immersive simulation, and this is more used in education or training purpose. And on the left-hand side, this is pretty much very early on virtual reality experience a lot of people probably have, which is in gaming. So you're using an avatar to go into 3D environments, but display through a 2D screen. That's why we call it non-immersive. So even though you feel that your own avatar is in that 3D environment, what you're seeing is actually a 2D flat screen. Relatively, obviously, the non-immersive simulation would be cheaper than a fully immersive simulation.
Alice?
Yes.
Okay, I want to ask one important question to you about virtual reality. Actually, virtual reality, we can define virtual reality as a computer, assisted simulation, program or application. So I think as for virtual reality is immersive and simulation.
Yes.
So two keywords is critical and vital for gaining, the virtual world and sort of things. So, how what do you think about the 2D desktop systems or 2D smartphone devices, and 3D the head mount the displays.
Yeah.
Actually, I purchased the Oculus for research, but this very inconvenient, and I don't want to wear that HMD in my lab, so I just don't do that test. So that's one of the big obstacles for me to use this inconvenience of HMD. But 2D is pretty much good. So what do you think about the 2D and the 3D and how effectively communicate with the users in terms of simulation and in terms of the immersiveness?
Obviously, if you're using a non-immersive simulation, so through the computer screen, the experience will be less immersive. A lot of people also share this concern. A couple months ago, I joined a Microsoft talk about extended reality. And Microsoft has want to push their HoloLens helmets for business usage. So they want to convince people to use it for business meetings or even engage in work. And especially after COVID-19, a lot of people started to work from home. And one of the participants actually raised the same concern. I don't want to wear a headset the whole day, even though I have to work from home. And I think technology will evolve and things will get smaller and smaller, just like, computer in the 1970s, the size of a computer is the size of a room. It's going to get lighter and lighter. And Oculus is actually going to launch a high-end VR/MR headsets later this year. And hopefully the performance will improve, and also in terms of the hardware specification, the weights will also be improved. But currently, yeah, it's wearing that helmet, sometimes it's not comfortable to a lot of users. But so it's a trade-off. And I also have a standalone machine similar to Oculus, which is HTC Focus 3. And one of the improvements they put in the headset is they actually create a mini fan inside the headset, so right in front of your forehead. So it allowed user to wear for a longer period of time, because typically when you wear a headset, it's going to be hot inside with all the heat generated through the machine. So adding a fan inside actually helped a lot in the user experience. And people feel the difference. I had my student wear both machine, and they in general prefer the standalone machine. But obviously the drawback of a standalone machine, given that it's lighter in weight and more comfortable when you wear it, the content that you can display through it were much more restricted. So okay. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
All right. So in terms of non-immersive simulations, probably the most famous one is Second Life. I'm not sure if any of you heard about this platform before, but it has been very popular from 2003 and capture a lot of discussions and a lot of attention from business since the launch of it. It's an online multimedia platform that allowed users, and they call them residents in Second Life, to create an avatar and then go into inwards and interact with other users. And even though it seems like a game, but it's a little bit different from the game that we normally play, which has an objective like there's a princess that you have to save or a monster you have to slaughter. In Second Life, they call it Second Life because it's another life from your first life in your real world, and you can do anything. At that time, a lot of business actually built a a virtual representation like Toyota's or Sony or actually IBM also. And a lot of university like NYU and Harvard University also have campus on Second Life. But it slowly died out after 10 years and recently become popular again because of Metaverse. And Second Life was launched in 2003 and it catch attention from hospitality industry very, very quickly. So in 2006, the probably was the first trial of VR application in the hospitality industry that Starwood Hotels at that time want to launch a new brand called Aloft. And when they were designing this concept and targeting actually young designers, they built a prototype in Second Life and they invite users to come in and experience the space and provide them feedbacks about how they should design this hotel. And this is changing how, you know, industry is designing. In the past, we may solicit users' experience through surveying. Or sometimes we build a mock room when the hotel is still under constructions and as a prototype for people to experience or maybe use it for marketing purpose. But this is a whole new experience for hotel industry that we actually can build entire hotel, and if users does not like this column, we will tear it down, or does not like this space, we will alter the design. It was not possible in the real world. In the real world, we cannot build a hotel. Oh, if you don't like this part, we will demolish that part. So it was a very early attempts to use VR in the hotel industry. And after that, there were a lot of also other ideas came out. For example, Marriott in 2014 create this booth called the teleporter, and it's a booth like a phone booth, but inside, other than they simulate visual through Oculus Rift, and they also control the temperatures and the smell inside the booth as well. So some people may call it 4D experience, because in addition to all the simulations provided through virtual reality, but additionally their sense of touch and also smelling simulation as well. So they put it in Times Square and invite people to come in and experience that. And there are two scenes they created. One is in Hawaii, so you'll be teleported to a beach in Hawaii, and the other virtual scene, it's Tower 42 in London, right? And so this project lasted for a couple of months, and then Marriott came out with another more interesting project called V Room Service, and learning from the experience from their previous year's project, the teleporter, and also some of the feedback during my research, also providing a similar result is if you create an empty scene. So for example, the Great Wall of China, people wear the helmets, look at the scene, and in 10 seconds they get bored. So there was no interactions in the virtual environment. So in terms of marketing purpose, it was not very effective. So having more interactions, it's their next goal. And in their next project, they choose a different tech supplier, which is Samsung Gear. So in the V-Room service, you can actually call a customer service line in your room and request a set of Samsung Gear to be delivered to your room, and you can hold on to that set of Samsung Gear for 24 hours. And along with that, they provide a program called VR Postcards, which contains stories about the travelers touring in Thailand. I think there are 3 things they created. So the tour in Beijing and the tour in Chile, and I forgot the third one, sorry about that. But user get more engaged because you're actually following a mini story when you're viewing for example, the busy streets in Beijing. So people stay longer in this virtual environment, and interactions become a very important aspect of virtual reality. And this is a quote from the Vice President of Marriott. He said, "Travel expands our mind and help push our imagination." Right? With just the virtual scene, no interaction, it's very difficult to imagine what can happen inside. But if you combine with storytelling, it's a more immersive and more engaging experience for travelers for the next generation. McDonald, yes.
Like it's good. It's a wrapping. Okay, like the device, the aspect, the manufacturer and the software engineering, they try to innovate the product, which should go comfortably attached to the users. There's their role, but our role is a research. Like when you said, it's interaction or stay longer in the virtual room. So sort of things, interaction, engagement, and stay longer. That is all about the behavior of users. So as researchers and as a research perspective, we have to consider the human mind, human desire, human behavior in the world, virtual world.
Yes.
So rather than devices. You look at the device, it's ridiculous, stupidly, 10 years later, I say, I look back to our time now, it's stupidly, we wearing the big head mount gears, and it's probably it's just like a prehistoric, period.
Yeah, it's still very early on. I mean, the virtual reality, the actual, some people call it 2016, so a couple years ago, as a year where VR started to boom, because that's a year when Sony and Samsung and HTC, 3 companies launched their product. And I actually also have HTC's first VR headset, and it's actually very different from the headset I purchased this year, Vive Pro. It's a lot more comfortable and more user-friendly. I think it's going to evolve and give it some time. And I think another thing I probably would also like to mention is in order to interact with virtual objects, we can also wear AR glasses. And AR glasses relatively is lighter, but it serves different purpose. And very interestingly, there are a lot of research on VR. There were not a lot of research on AR. So I think there are also a lot of potential for researchers in the field of AR. And both Apple and Oculus, actually Meta, are saying that they're going to launch new AR product early next year. So let's wait and see. All right, this is another example of hospitality industry is trying to use VR for marketing. So McDonald's in 2016 tried to allow kids to turn the Happy Meal boxes into VR goggles. And then theme parks as well. And theme park probably will be one of the great choices for VR applications. And Disney, I know, has been investing a lot in creating virtual rides. And in Taiwan, there's a theme park called Liufu Village. Over the past 10 years, they have tried many different invented many different VR rides, including, the flying carpets or the haunted house, or the most recent one is allowing multiplayer to enter into the same VR scene and play together. All right, so this is the background information about the VR application in hospitality and tourism industries. And now I'd like to turn your focus into research projects. So the 3 research projects, like I mentioned before, one is related to sustainable tourism, which is a hot topic also recently after United Nations push very heavily on their SDGs. And the second one is relating to utilizing VR in marketing purpose. And then the last one is related to training. So let's start with the first one about promotion of sustainability through VR marine tool. The reason I wanted to start this project back in 2018, I went scuba diving in Great Barrier Reefs in Australia, and I almost cried when I was there because I actually lived in Australia about 20 years ago. And when I visited Great Barrier Reef, it was very, very beautiful 20 years ago. And in 2018, when I visited Great Barrier Reef again, most of the coral were severely bleached. So I feel that I have the urge to, contribute to promoting marine sustainability. And ocean is also a very important part of our lives, right? The ocean covers 71% of our Earth's surface, and it generates a lot of activities, recreationally or economically. And based on OECD's reports, the value generated through maritime and coastal tourism actually will be the largest components or the largest percentage among all the ocean-based industry, and that amount keep growing. And in Taiwan, we also are facing a very serious coral breaching situation. And that's why I proposed this project to our government last year. And my research project was funded. Taiwan, we are an island. So with the island ecosystem, we have a great condition to develop ocean-related industry, and especially marine tourism. And one very important aspect of sustainability education is experience education. So when the visitors are in the destinations, through a variety of actions, we can teach them how to act more sustainable to protect the environments. However, when we talk about marine tourism, there are many limitations. For example, I am a certified scuba diver. That's why I can see a large scale of coral in the ocean. But getting that certificate takes trainings and exams. So not everybody would like to get the certificates and have access to ocean. And also some of the people are maybe living far away from the coastal line. Therefore, people have been proposing using a virtual tour to replace the actual tour so that you simulate an environment where the tourists are actually in the oceans and appreciate the beauties of the oceans and hopefully engage them in sustainable behavior and create an awareness to protect the environment. All right, and a lot of VR study in the past were actually using VR to trigger the cognitive reactions and lead to the final behavior change or behavior intention. But in this particular research project, I want to look at more of the emotional side and how would that move people's or triggers people's behavior intention. So my research, the research objective of this project is to understand the effect of VR on the emotional response, and also come up with a research model that describe how we can provide a technological stimuli and that create an emotional response and eventually lead to sustainable behavior intention. And finally, we plan to also, we're using partially square, and one of the capability of partially square is to conduct a predictive analysis. We haven't conducted that part, so that result was not displayed in today's presentation, but we're going to do that as well. So this is a conceptual model we have. We're using media richness theory to represent the technological stimuli that's provided through a virtual marine tour, and which we hypothesize that will generate emotional response. And we use a theory called PAD model, which I'll explain later. And that posits that emotional response can be divided into 3 different aspects: pleasure, arousal, and dominance. And this emotional response will trigger people's behavior. So this is based on the SOR, stimuli, organism, and response framework. So yes.
Questions.
Yes.
Like your research model seems very interesting, and you choose the very important issue, emotional response, which means arousal. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, the lack of the VR is emotional response, and like when you said the marine or education is cognitive processing, which is the learning aspect. So it's VR, and that would be a very critical role for education and manual, you know, learning from a distance, which is very important and positive side. But again, the arousal and emotional response is still, there is very short of that emotional response. You know, still the contents and then the avatars is still didn't do well. Arousal, you know, my emotional stuff. But and MI's researchers, they also pretty much focus on arousal from contents and IT or whatever. But psychological aspect and the psychological researchers, they are targeting on more narrow down this like a simulation of the emotion and mind, like whether arousal first and later reaction, or reaction first and then arousal, something like that. What do you think? Your model is you feel much more arousal first and then later feel different in your brain. There is a mental model change.
Yeah.
But sometimes we are thinking about, you know, when I see something very surprising stuff and my body reaction first, and then later I'm thinking, wow, there's a surprise.
Yeah, there are actually different theories about that. Sometimes there are a group of researchers believe they're behavioralists. So they're believing that we actually do not engage in cognitive process when we receive a stimulus from the environment. We react to the stimulus from the environment. And so there are very limited cognitive process involved in, you know, your behavior. And there are also a different school of scholar thinking that, you know, whatever behavior we engage in, it's a result of a serious thought process. And I mean, they're advocates for each side, and we're choosing because the underlying theoretical lens we're choosing is SOR, so stimuli, organism, response, which, you know, the environmental stimuli will trigger people's emotional response, and people's emotions will actually trigger either approach behavior or avoidance behavior, depending on whether it's a positive emotional response or a negative emotional response. And I think because we have to choose one or other, so and this is the path we chose. we may be able to run the actually data the other way around and see whether the other way around, the hypothesis the other way around would be supported or not. But that's a good suggestion. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, so the emotional response side, we utilize this PAD model, pleasure, arousal, and dominance emotional model, which typically your emotion comprise three response: pleasure, arousal, dominance, and I provided the definition of these three emotional response. I think you can read this. And this PAD model actually originated from environmental psychology. So it was a actual physical environment that people were studying before, but some information system researchers has been using PAD model in virtual environment, for example, in website designs or animated characters in virtual worlds. So we think because we also create environments in a virtual situation, so it's a suitable theory to borrow from environmental psychology to study virtual environment. And the stimuli, the technological stimuli, it's based on this media richness theory. This is a theory that was proposed in 1984. And basically, you can rank the richness of media based on four criteria. The first one is immediate feedback. So whether when you're communicating, you can provide immediate feedback. All right, let me give you an example. The richest media that we can have is face-to-face communication, right? So just like when if I am presenting physically in Korea, and if I can see your facial expressions and I will see whether you understand or not. But if I am presenting through an online platform, if you do not turn on your camera, I won't be able to receive your feedback, or you may be shy and you're not asking questions. So I wouldn't be able to receive immediate feedback from you. Then the media richness level will be lower. All right. The second criteria is whether you can receive multiple cues, right? In a physical face-to-face interaction, you can use voice inflections or body language or facial expressions. I can also put symbols in my PowerPoint presentations that help convey information through a face-to-face communication. So the second criteria is whether there are multiple cues. Lean media would be documents, paper documents, like newspaper, which you mainly relying on text on a piece of paper to convey information. Right, and then the third criteria is personal focus, whether I can tailor the information I'm going to deliver to you based on the cues I am receiving from you or from the contacts, from the environment, and the feedback, and the immediate feedback from you. And the last criteria is language variability. So whether I can use a variety of language symbols to convey information, and at different language, different symbols may contain different meanings. So whether I can provide, for example, a website design that has multiple language could also enrich the media as well. So typically the hierarchy of the media, like I mentioned before, the richest media, typically we will consider face-to-face meeting, and then followed by, for example, telephone, which you can still receive the cue of voice, but you cannot receive the cues of body gestures or facial expression. And then a level below that probably will be emails or memos or letters. But in virtual realities, we think that you can actually mimic the real world communication environment, because in some of the technology nowadays, you actually can have facial expression in when you're inward. So your avatar can have a emotion representation. as well, and also body language if you're using avatar as well. So in a VR experience, you will have experience that closer to face-to-face communication. So it would be a richer media. And when you're in the virtual experience, you will have behavior control to interact with the virtual objects. You can walk around and look at, turn your head freely to look around in the virtual environment. So it does affect the dominance response, which you feel that you have control over the environments. And it also, there has been also studies in destination marketings proving that VR will result in higher level of arousal, and also in the simulated environments, it will actually stimulate this exciting experience and result in a pleasure and joyful experience. So very, very briefly explained, we hypothesized that media richness will positively affect all three emotional response. And then according to psychological reactance theories, if you feel that your freedom is restricted, you typically will have a negative feeling about the environments. Or when you have limited behavior control over the environment, that will lead to a negative emotion response. For example, when you are in a museum, if you see restricted area that you cannot go in, a tourist may have a negative feelings to the museum. And so that's what we hypothesize, that dominance will have an effect on arousal, and arousal has been also proved that will lead to a pleasure experience. So when you feel that you're in control and free in a VR tour, you will be stimulated and aroused. The feeling will be aroused, and the feelings of arousal will lead to happiness and pleasure. So that's our hypothesis 2A and 2B. All right, and then mental model reflects an individual's understanding of a phenomenon, and a learning process should result in a change in your understanding of this phenomenon. And the phenomenon we chosen for this study is marine sustainability. So how you understand the marine species and how important this marine species to our environment. Right. So if you have a change of understanding of marine sustainability, then your mental model changed, and that means the learning has occurred. So that it's our hypothesis 3. And when the learning occurs, then you obviously will know more about, your responsibility as a tourist to the environment and engage in sustainable behavior intention. All right, so let me talk a little bit about our research design. So it's an experimental design with surveying, and the hardware we're using is VR, HTC Vive Pro. The marine tour, we're utilizing an app we purchased from Steam, which is a gaming platform called The Blue. And I think they did a great job in simulating marine environments. The original, the Blue experience did not contain any information about marine species. So we actually developed our own script to introduce manta ray, which you can see on the top of the screen, top right of the screen, and blue whale, which both animals you will see during this VR marine tour. And we pre-recorded that script and play it during the VR marine tour to provide educational information on marine species. And we conducted the data collections this summer, June 20 to 30. Within 10 days, we invited 140 participants to wear the HTC Vive Pro and experience a virtual marine tour, and then respond to the survey. And for data analysis, we use partial least square structure equation modeling, specifically Smart PLS 4.0 for data analysis. So let me show you a little bit about on what tourists or participants see.
地球是一颗蓝色星球，有72%的表面积被海洋覆盖。海洋是一切生物的起源，已知海洋生物有20多万种。
Right, so the voice is from my graduate student, so she pre-recorded the script and play along with the marine tour. So once you go into the VR environment, you will be standing on top of a shipwreck. And at the beginning, we'll provide some basic information about, oceans and importance of marine sustainability. And then a manta ray actually will fly through the scene. So that's the time we introduce marine species, starting with manta ray, one of the endangered species. And then you will see a blue whale coming from the right-hand side of your environment. And it came actually very, very close to you. And some of our participants actually was scared during this marine tour because it came actually very, very close to you. And this is also the time we provide some important educational information about blue whale, also an endangered species. There are only a couple hundreds on our planet now. So this lasts for about 1 minute or so. And then we ask the participant to respond in a survey and measure media richness, pleasure, arousal, dominance, mental change, and yes.
Questions about your research, the experimental design.
Yeah.
Are pretty much understandable, and but I know you already take a test and collect data from the experiment, but I'm also considering the collecting data using VR, but my concern is how to interact with the object. I mean, virtual like whales, virtual whales in VR, but looking is just like it's very similar with two-dimensional, just the two-dimension. But VR and or metaverse world, we have to interact socially with like a whale and myself. Okay, I put myself into that scene and simulation with between me and the whales. That would be much give me the immersiveness in the simulation between whales and myself. There is a social aspect and a social engagement.
Yes.
And using of avatars, sort of things. So what do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, it's what I'm going to talk about in the result sections as well. And in this particular content, there were very limited interaction. But in the other two projects that I'm going to present in a minute, we actually planned interactions in the scene. This VR marine tool, because the content was not built by us, so we purchased directly from the Steam. Therefore, there was no interaction built inside. And it did affect our research results. That actually you're going to see later. So that actually showcases how important interaction is in a virtual environment. All right, so fast forward, because of the time, I'm going to just tell you that, convergent validity and discriminant validity were all satisfied, and also factor loadings. And this is a result of our hypothesis testing. So the pass coefficient was evaluated using bootstrapping, and all the hypothesis was supported except for hypothesis H2A. So the positive influence of dominance on arousal was only marginally supported with a p-value of 0.056. So pretty close to significance, but not yet. All right, and the model explains 24.8% of the variance in sustainable behavior intention. All right, so obviously this is a pilot study of the actual full study, because the tour was actually very short. It's only lasts for like 1 minute and 8 seconds or something like that. But what we want to do is, other than, like a lot of study the cognitive reactions of VR, we want to know more about the emotional reaction to VR and how that leads to behavior intention. So we did that part. The important point mentioned by Dr. Gu is this positive influence of dominance on arousal is marginally significant. And we suspect that it's because the participant limited interaction during the blue experience. So they cannot control whether they want to stop or interact with the fish in the VR mirroring tool. The fish will just fly over, and when it's gone, it's gone. Right. So there were a lot less control as a typical VR environment, like you were in the real world. It's more like a video showing in a 3D environment, like a 3D movie. Let's put it that way. So this probably affects our results on this hypothesis. And so that's in the future research, we should provide more control over the environment. And in our next study, we'll use a longer, the blue series that lasts for 7 minutes. And we can also supply more information about marine species and introduce a lot more different kind of marine species and sustainability. And in our hypothesis, in terms of the technological stimuli, we only study media richness, but there are also a lot of perceptual stimuli that we can study, including telepresence, which is the feeling of you actually being in the ocean instead of in the classrooms, or representation fidelity. You can see that in the video. It's not a video shooting from a real environment. It's a computer graphic. It's built from a fake environment. So there are research in the past saying that representation fidelity also significantly affects the result of VR. So we can also study that in our full study as well. And in addition to emotions, we can also at the same time measure cognitive reactions, just like other study, the feeling of immersions and the state of flow to make the theoretical model more complete and more comprehensive. So that's our next step for this research project. All right, and then I'm going to turn your attention to, marketing travel and tourism products through virtual reality. All right, so the motivation has actually come from this concept of tourism product as a confidence good, right? When you make a booking of hotel rooms, for example, you cannot sample the product before you make the purchase decision. Unlike you buy a piece of furniture where you can go to IKEA and you can touch the desk and feel the texture of the desk and measure the desk before you decide you want to take it home or not. But when we make a hotel booking, it's basically based on your confidence that the hotel will give you the same room as they presented through the photos on the website. So that's why we call tourism product as confidence goods, because you cannot try or test before you're making a purchasing decisions. It's based on your trust to the service provider to, follow the obligation they promise. But VR allow you to provide a sample for your tourism product before making this purchase intention. And however, currently most of the travel agencies are still relying a 2D interface, like paper brochure or video clips to distribute information to consumers. what we want to know is whether VR will be a more effective marketing tool. And we also factor in a different variable called product complexity, right? Developing VR content can be very expensive. For example, for this project, we actually spent $1.1 million NT in building the VR content for 2 tourism products. So depending on the details of the environments and the level of interaction you want to incorporate into the virtual environments, it can be very pricey. So whether your investments in VR worth the revenue generated through these marketing efforts will be a key issue for practitioner. So the whole idea starting from when we think about, if we book backpackers in, let's say I want to go to Korea to visit June, my classmates. I may not need a lot of information because three-star hotel or a backpacker hostel is a pretty standardized tourism product. There were not much surprise or variations of that. But in other extremes, some tourism product can be very complex, like cruise ships. A lot of people probably have not been on a cruise ship. So when you presented cruise ships to people through a brochure, it's very difficult for potential tourists to imagine in their mind how this cruise experience would be. So VR probably will be a more effective tool in delivering information to tourists. So in this research model, we hypothesize that the stimuli from VR can enhance consumer trust because you're providing a pre-sample to customer. But that strength of relationship depending on whether it's a simple product or a complex product, right? And then because tourism product is a consumer confidence good, so if you gain trust, consumer trust, then consumer will have a higher propensity to make the booking, so higher purchase intention. Right? Again, we rely on media richness theory, but when we apply it into a tourism context, you can see this trade-off of with the richness of the media and the reach of the media. So in one extreme, for example, if you walk into a travel agency and talk to a travel agent in face-to-face communication, say, after being locked down in my country for 2 years, I really want to go on a trip to Europe. And the travel agents can provide you with a lot of tailored and personalized information through these communications, right? So you have a very rich media, which is face-to-face communication, but at each time you probably can reach only a very limited amount of people. In other words, probably you and your family members at one time. On the other extremes, we can also create a lot of paper brochure of destination and we distribute it on the streets to other people. And so in that sense, we reach a lot of people, but the communication medium is very lean. You mainly relying on textual information. There was no body language, no emotions, no gesture, and no immediate feedback that you can provide through paper brochure. So you reach a lot of audience, but at the same time, the richness of the media decrease. So our idea is virtual reality can actually push this boundaries to right-hand side, that you create a interactive VR environments will provide a very rich media to deliver to a lot of people once the content is created.
Alice,
yes.
Questions about that theory?
Yes.
I also write a paper about the research media richness theory. But at this moment, the issue is whether we use a 2D dimension or 3D dimensional the devices. You know, as we all understanding about the 3D dimensionals give us more immersive situation.
Yes.
It's much media richness, but however, very uncomfortable and doesn't reflect very well the reality. But 2D dimension give us very simple and parsimonious and easy to use and usefulness. So 2D dimension actually is much powerful to reach the users rather than 3D dimension. But however, as far as that is the fact, but we are still pursuing 3D rather than 2D at this moment to get more immersiveness, get more real situation. So in that case, a media richness theory we can apply for, like when you said, rich media will explain deeply and breadthly better than the 2D, but 2D gave us the simple and convenientness.
Yeah.
So probably at this moment, in terms of that theory, media richness, we can apply for that situation, 2D or 3D, which more effectively to users.
Yes, and that's actually what we want to study in this research project. You know, the effectiveness of different marketing tool, whether it's the 2D or 3D, and combined with product complexity. I mean, if you want to invest in VR, 3D content, where should you focus your resources on? And the result I'm presenting here is also a preliminary result. So when we collect data, we actually collect 2 different marketing channels, which is a 2D video and a 3D VR, and 2 different tourism products. But we haven't truly analyzed the data yet. So I'm presenting some preliminary data analysis results in this study. But this is a very interesting question as well. For me, possibly for other researchers as well, and worth investigation in the future. I hope that satisfies you. I don't know the answer, but yeah, pretty much what is our responsibility to prove that. All right, so in terms of telepresence, we're using this embodied social presence theory, which you feel that you're you have a virtual representation in the virtual environment, so that make you feel that you're actually present in that virtual environment. Just to sum it up very quickly because of the time. And once you have a 3D experience, you can actually learn about the tourism product through direct experience, which was not allowed in the physical world before. And that will enhance people's understanding of your tourism product and eventually lead to consumer trust, right? The more you know about the product, or if you can pre-sample the product, you have more belief on this travel agency or hotel or whatever tourist product provider will fulfill their commitments in this transactional relationship, which you pay them for their service. All right, so that's what we hypothesize H1 and H2. And once you have trust, this is a long proven relationship. Consumer trust will lead to higher purchase intention. And like I mentioned before, product complexity will moderate the relationship between media richness and telepresence to trusts, and the way we define product complexity is as a function of the number of elements in this tourism product and the internal relationship among all these different components in the tourism product. I'll show you the product we chose later. And the reason that we think there's a moderating effect is when it's a more complex tourism product, users have to provide more cognitive resources in order to understand and process the information and assign meanings to all the cues, information cues that they receive through different medias. And media richness actually has improved to actually reduce the ambiguity of the task, right? So if it's a more complex product, VR, it's a better channel to help understanding and assign meanings to this informations provided through about the tourism product. Right, so again, we use experimental designs and follow up with a survey, and the hardware we're using is still VAC Pro. And the two tourism product we choose is a leisure farm, because there are a lot of different things you can do in a leisure farm, so a lot more components, and a three-star hotel in Taipei. And the participants were randomly assigned to experience either a leisure farm or this three-star hotel, and we collected more than 200 participants from this study. Actually, the whole study we collected more than 400, but for the presentation of the preliminary results, I only presented the VR part. So there are 103 participants experienced the leisure farm, and 104 participants visited the virtual hotel. Data collection periods last for about a month, also during the summer. And we also use Smart PLS 4.0 to run structural equation modeling. All right, so just to talk a little bit about the tourism product. In the tourism product, the three-star hotel is Orange Hotel in Ximen. And this brand belongs to Forte Hotel Groups. They were nice enough to allow us to go in and do a site inspections and build the model to scale. And there are actually three main components or three main elements or services they provide. Typically the guest check-in will receive the at the lobby receive the check-in services and checkout service when they leave. And the second most important component is the guest room. And in this hotel, because they have this objective to foster social interactions among travelers, even though they are strangers. So on the basement, they create a common space, which they provide free food that include fruits and like apples and bananas and orange, and also toast with toasters and milk and juice. So if you're hungry in the middle of the night, you cannot sleep, you can come down and maybe meet other tourists and chat and while you're enjoying the free food in this common area. So it's a social space they provided. In each of the three space, we plan interactions, which you will see later. The other product, complex product, we chose Shangri-La Leisure Farm. So you can see that there are a lot more components in this tourism product. Other than you also need to receive check-in services and checkout service at the lobby and also the guest rooms. But there's also a leisure farm where you can pick fruits. And in the VR experience, you can actually pick fruits and eat the fruit. I mean, virtually eat the food. And you can also view or look at the beautiful scenery around the farm. And there are also a lot of experience activities that the farm plan, like the sky lanterns and playing gyro and firecrackers. Again, you will also see in the video I'm going to show you actually now. So this is the VR capture of the Orange Hotel, the 3-star hotel, simple product. So once you go, sorry. Once you go into the virtual 3-star hotel, and we built actually customly based on the real environment. So the first interaction you have is to give the passport to the front desk to check in. And once you finish checking, you're allowed to go into the guest room or the common room. And when you go into the guest room, the interactions activities we plan here is the drink. So you can, in this hotel, they also do not provide bottled water for sustainable reasons. So they provide tea bags and water kettles. So the actions that users can engage in is to make a cup of tea and drink that cup of tea. All right, let me fast forward. And when you get out of the room and go down to the common rooms, along the side of the staircase are very famous graffitis. So that's another part we want to showcase in the virtual environment. And when you go in, the interaction we plan here, other than, you can look around and see all the machines that users or guests can use when they are in this common room. The interaction is actually you can put the toast into the toaster ovens and toast it, and once the bread is toasted, you can eat it. Another interaction is to grab an apple or an orange or a banana and also eat it. So free food, free virtual food in the virtual environment as well. So that's pretty much the interactions we planned in this 3D hotel. Now let me show you the leisure farm. As I mentioned, in the leisure farm, there are a lot more actions they can perform. So same thing when you arrive at the leisure farm, the first thing is to check in. And you may notice that the passport is a Singapore passport because the research project is actually funded by Singapore government.
Oh, huh.
So that's, to make Singapore government happy. Again, this is the guest rooms, and we planned same activities. You can actually make teas in the guest room. This is also actually one of a very good activity to conduct in the room in the physical world. There is actually a table, stool, actually, a place where you can sit by the window and enjoy the tea. Same environment in the real world. All right, and then once you come out of the rooms, you can go to the square in front of the hotel building, the accommodation building. And in this leisure farm, they actually celebrate Chinese New Year every night. So you can play firecrackers. They play firecrackers every night. All right, so you can light up the dragon firecracker, and you can also play the gyro. That's another activity. And one of my favorite activities in actually the real environment, and as well as in the virtual environment, is playing the sky lantern. So you can light up the sky lantern and say farewell to the sky lanterns. It was not shown very clearly from the video, but the starry sky is actually very beautiful. One of our participants actually eventually lied down on the ground just to appreciate the sky. He stayed here for quite a long time. All right, and then once we come out from the square, we can go to the farm. And when we visit the farm, it was in February. So the fruit that we can harvest, it's dragon fruits and also orange. So you can go get closer to different trees, different type of trees, and then get different fruits as you like. And another activities on the observatory deck is there's actually a physical drum there. So we also put a drum, the same constructions in the virtual environment, and you can play with the drum. So you can see that this is a more complex tourism product than the 3-star hotel. And again, when we analyze our data, conversion validity and discriminant validity were all satisfied. And in our structural model, we prove that media richness positively influence consumer trust, regardless whether the level of product complexity. So whether it's a simple product or complex product, the impact of media richness to consumer trust stay the same. But the impact of telepresence to consumer trust is mediated by product complexity. So in a more complex product, the impact of telepresence to consumer trust is higher. All right, so we have some promising results. We also collected data from using video and also created through the project when we actually do the site scouting to the 3D hotel, 3-star hotel and the leisure farm. And we want to examine what would be the best fit between a 2D or 3D information distributions and product complexity. So that's what we're going to do in the next step. All right, I have about 10 minutes. So let me share with you my last research project. And this is a paper that's already published. So if you're interested, you can actually download the paper and read it. And all right, so the research motivations behind this project is that because I worked in hotel before, and most of the training we receive in the hotel, it's on-the-job training. So we're basically using our customer as a guinea pig, which, you know, we use our newbies to practice on our customer, which sometimes create an unsatisfactory customer experience. And at the same time, it's also impossible for a hotel to create a lobby, for example, just for training purpose, a simulated environments in the physical world. The one time I actually saw that was when I was teaching in Chinese University of Hong Kong. They have a training lab, which they built a lobby based on Hyatt Regency Shatin. So the same design. And they use this training lab to teach students how to check in a guest or provide the guest service at the front desk. But that's very, very costly. And that probably it's the only one example I have seen that create a physical environment the same as a hotel environment, but only for training purpose. Cost-effective why was not worthwhile for business. So the question that comes into my mind is, can we build a virtual environment for training? So very early on, when I was still playing in Second Life, I create a virtual hotel in Second Life and try to simulate an environment. And that project did not go very far because of the funding issue. Also, plus it was not a very immersive environment, as you explained before. It's mainly still based on a 2D environment, 2D visualization. So it was not a very successful project. But now that we have, I have a lot of different VR headsets. So I'm thinking about coming back to revisit this research project that I started a long time ago. Right, so in this study, we utilize this theory called situated cognitive theory. So in short, when learning occur, the context of where the learning occur is also important. So the context or the environments where the learning occur, and especially applicable in our training because we provide on-the-job training, right, in the actual work environments, and also the interaction with group members. For example, your interaction with the guests when you are in the training. And that also related to one of the issues that Dr. Koo mentioned before, the social interactions. in the virtual environments. And all that will help form the knowledge or help the learners acquire knowledge in the environment. So this theory is looking at the learning from a cognitive constructivism perspective to explain the on-the-job training situation. And the concept of situativity is a very, very important fundamental concept to all the cognitive activities. All right, so this is our research model, which in the research model, we identify 3 contextual awareness, so location awareness and social awareness and task awareness will affects people's cognitive assumptions and eventually lead to, again, learning, which is mental model change. So the location awareness is the perception of their people's understanding of the relevant elements in the environment. For example, when you're standing in a lobby, you see the front desk and the computers and the the decoration of the lobby, and you receive all this information cues and assign meanings to all this information, visual information cues that you're processing. And that means that you're engaging in a cognitive process, in short. So that's why we hypothesize that location awareness, when you're aware of all the information cues in the location, you're in a state of cognitive absorption. The social awareness is defined as the understanding of others. So whether you perceive that other people are present in this environment and their behavior, and also understanding the intention of their behavior or assign meaning to their behavior as well. So there are a lot of social cues, including verbal cues, like people talking to you, or they're giving you a sign language or things like that. And based on your previous social experience, you assign meanings to those cues. So it triggers your attention to, the awareness of the social environments, or, social aspect in the environment. So when you process this information cue based on your previous experience in social interactions, you engage in a selective and cognitive process. So that's why we hypothesize that social awareness will also positively relate to cognitive absorption. Finally, task-related cues. So task-related cues can be in the form of visual or haptic or audio or textual information, just like when your professor gives you assignments, could be a piece of paper, or could be a verbal communications, or it could be a video recording of a message from your professor, right? So task-related cue can be presented in a very different information representation form. So this information cues related to a particular task will also triggers people's attentions and allowing users of or the people who are engaging in this task to gain understanding what he or she should do for the task in this environment. And once they process this information cues, either from audio or visual or haptic cues, and that will share or shape, actually, it's a typo, shape the possibility of actions that they will engage in, or possibly actions that they want to perform in order to complete the tasks. So in that sense, people are also cognitively engaged. Therefore, we hypothesize that people's the task awareness will positively related to cognitive absorption. And when you are in a state of cognitive absorptions, it means that you're in a state, you're performing in an activity which require most of your cognitive demand, and you're ignoring other cognitive demand from other tasks or other information cues in the environments. And some of the theory also call this when you're in the state of cognitive absorption, you're experiencing flow. So there's a whole flow theory behind that as well. And past research has shown cognitive absorptions will lead to a better learning, so a positive learning outcome. So we hypothesize that cognitive absorption is positively associated with mental model change. And what we would like to demonstrate through this research project, sorry, is that this relationship should have no difference between a real training or a virtual training, since we're assuming that the virtual environment is mimicking the real environment. So this project was utilizing the teaching hotel from the hotel I worked for before, Mingchuan University. So in Mingchuan universities, we had a real teaching hotel. And this is a lobby of the real teaching hotel, and we measure the lobby, and then we recreate the exact same lobby in the virtual environment using Unity. Right, and the interactions was actually conducted by using two sets of HCC vibe. So one set of HCC vibe was worn by a research assistant, and he was playing as a guest in the scenario, and the participants of the study act as a front desk agent to provide check-in process to the guests in the virtual environment. So we conducted a between subject experiment to compare the learning outcome between virtual and real world training. Now, before we actually provide the physical training or the practice, whether in real world or in a real hotel or virtual hotel, we provide a lecture to students on how to perform hotel check-in process. And then we give them 3 task-related questions to test their base knowledge on how much they understand what should they perform in the check-in process. And then the students are randomly assigned to practice checking a guest in either a real hotel or a virtual hotel. And then we give them a survey to measure the construct that we're interested in. And again, the same task-oriented question, that 3 questions we gave before the students conduct the practice session to test whether their knowledge improved or not. We recruited 131 participants, 66 of them experienced real-world training, and 65 of them received virtual training. So they practiced the check-in process in the virtual world. Let me show you, the view. So the research assistant play as a guest in the virtual environment was shown as an avatar. And they actually interact in the same simulated environment. And the students play as a front desk. So the student actually stand in front of the front desk to perform the check-in to the guest. So the student will ask the guest to provide, actually, let me mute the video. We'll ask the guests to provide passport and credit cards that's necessary for the check-in, and we'll come to the computers to, operate the property management system in order to locate the reservations. And in here, we specifically use head-mount displays, a larger screen, because in the virtual environment, it's very difficult to look at the information in the small screen, in the mini computer in the virtual environment. All right, and then swipe the credit card, and the registration card will print out from the printer, and the student will print out the registration card from the printer and ask the guests to sign this registration card and verify reservation information with the guest as well. And again, we provide a larger display of the registration cards in front of the participant as well, to provide a clear information, and our students just wander around. All right, and once the guest sign the registration card, the check-in process is pretty much completed, and the last step is to give the room key to the guest. So that's pretty much what the participants see. Obviously, the research assistants see from the other angle. We don't have time to play that video today, sorry. And the data collection was in 2019. And again, we conduct partially square SEM. And we pass the conversion and discriminant validity. And when testing the significance of the pass, social awareness did not have an impact on cognitive absorption. Location awareness and task awareness has an impact on cognitive absorption. Cognitive absorption has an impact on mental model change, which means the learning actually occurred. And the interaction of training mode is not significant. So that means the impact stayed the same, regardless whether it's a virtual training or real world training. So that's what we would like to see in the result. You can recreate a virtual hotel and provide training in this virtual hotel at a lower cost than or to replace the physical training in the real environment. We also analyze whether people's knowledge increase. So the there are 3 task-related questions we ask. One is about, what kind of documents you should request from the guests during the checking process. So the actual fact-checking information relating to their knowledge about the checking process. The second question is about, what kind of information you should verify with the guests during the check-in process. The last question is a scale of 1 to 7, asking whether they feel confident in performing this check-in process with the real guests. And there's a very interesting result also coming from this question. Some of the students told me that after the lecture, when I tell them, these are all the steps you need to perform during the check-in process, they think that's not rocket science. I can do that with no questions. They are very confident, but once they have to actually perform that, either in a virtual environment or the real environment, they realize that it's not as simple as what they imagined. But overall, there's still a higher score than higher confidence than they practiced before. All right, and we conduct a t-test to test whether there's a significant improvement between before and after the training was provided, and all 3 questions prove significant improvements between before and after. So that is the study, and we did not find support for social awareness of cognitive absorption. That possibly also because there were only 2 people in the virtual environment or in the real environment. There were not a lot of others. So the social awareness was somehow limited in this environment. So we should think of other scenario that could create a group task where you need a teamwork that would require more social awareness in order to complete the task. We also was hoping to task the emotional involvement in the future study as well. In this task, the task that we use in this particular context, it's checking process, right? It's a very straightforward cognitive process, but some of the tasks probably require emotional involvement, like caring for your customers. And past study has proved that emotional involvement was more difficult to induce through virtual reality. So whether it would be achieve the same effectiveness if we are training affective skill will still remain a question that's worth investigating. All right, another future studies that I am also interested in is recently there are a lot more smell simulation. So in the past, or in all three research projects, you see it, they're all simulating visual or hearing capability of the participants, but there were not many studies on simulating the smelling. So whether you're hiking in a forest where you can smell the trees and the flowers, will provide a more immersive travel experience. Or when you are training people's cooking skills and allowing your students to smell the foods will create a more immersive learning environment. Would that be more effectively lead to the learning outcome? Would be what I'm interested in studying in my next step of research. So I'm sorry that I went over time, but hopefully it's an interesting presentation to you.
It is. You three different research introduced to us, very inspiring us and inspiring me aggressively for the research regarding VR, metaverse, and AR. Wow, it's surprising and very interesting. Okay, students, so we have just a few minutes. You can ask to her whatever you want to know about research. Okay.
All right, I see one question in the chat. One student mentioned that she is interested in elderly tourism. And there's actually a lot of study, not a lot of study, but a lot of applications of VR in elderly citizens, whether it's cognitive training, because you know, when people get older, they lost their memory and lost their, they probably forget the name about, you know, the environments or the objects they are seeing in the environment. So I actually have seen app developed for senior citizens to try them to remember things, or train them to go shopping in supermarket, but in a safe environment. So instead of sending them actually to the supermarket and practice buying things in a virtual environment, you know, practice buying fruits or milk or bread in the supermarkets. Another application that I have seen is to recreate their significant moments, like your weddings or your first child birth, to trigger their memories.
Good.
And in terms of tourism, some of the nursing home are also using VR to provide, you know, entertainment to elderly. They cannot travel, but they can travel virtually as well. So I think there are a lot of possibility for this demographic, the elderly citizens as well. And
wow,
also, if you're interested in collaborating in this research.
I definitely are interested in the collaborating with you. If you provide that kind of application to us, okay, I want to participate actively in your research context. Okay, good. Anyway, students, feel free to ask her about your questions.
Professor Louis, thank you very much for your lecture. I have one opinion about the part that you're explaining about the hotel marketing part, the research on the hotel marketing using the VR.
Yes.
And about the media richness. What I was thinking is, using the media richness is depending on the travelers, the stage of where they are. Like when they're in the earlier stage of planning their visit, I think they are more prefer the magazines or the reviews or this kind of thing. And then once they are narrow it down the destination and the property, I think they are more interested in the come over and experience the VR. That one was one of my opinion. And then similarly in the airline, the Qatar airline, they were launching the VR VR experiences program that is called the Qverse. And then, but I think what they are doing is they don't want everyone to appreciate their program. But what I was thinking is they are the first airline to launching such a program. So I think they are more like into building the brand image by launching and using some of their revenue on it. So what do you think about it?
I think airline, it's one of the industry among travel and tourism industry are more aggressively in adapting to new technology. I also have seen New Zealand Airlines using HoloLens to provide customer experience, so facial recognition and emotion detections. Whether it actually improves revenue, I think it's a long jump from providing VR experience so far. And this is actually a very interesting question. I was talking to some of my colleagues as well. How do you prove that, you know, your investments in creating this VR content actually lead to financial return? And I think this is also a long-lasting question in not just in VR, but in MRS research in general. How do you prove the causal relationship between IT investments, buying systems or a new piece of technology, and lead to firm's performance financially and non-financially? I do not have answer yet, and when I actually write papers that link to firms' performance, I always also will get questions from reviewers. You know, you cannot prove that causal relationship because there are also a lot of other factors in the environment that will also affect financial performance. One of the way that I try to get away with that accuse is use a relative measure of your performance to your competitive performance. So in a hotel industry, we have SCR Research, which is a consulting company that consolidates hotels' performance data, produce an index called RevPAR index, or in general, you can probably call it competitive index. So it calculates the relative ratio between your room rate, occupancy, or RevPAR against your competitive financial measures, ADR, room rates, and occupancy and RevPAR. I try not to throw in hospitality terminologies too much.
Okay.
All right. So in that sense, if it's a relative measure, you eliminate a lot of environmental factors that affects the financial results. So that's one way I try to use to prove that, or get away from the acquisition of, you know, confounds in your study. Airline, I never worked for airlines, so I'm not really sure about what kind of measure that you can use for airline. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Alice, we have just 10 minutes left, so a few more questions from students. Okay. And please, short question to her. Long question is not good. Okay.
Okay, Professor, I have a question. Yeah. My question is related to the media and the. Can you hear me?
Oh.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, and I think the younger generation, such as Z generation or the as you know, the younger generation, they are already familiar to the media, such as the video. So I think it is quite difficult, challenging for them to read the text than just show the video. So I think the media richness is depending on the generation. So, but as you know, in hotel there are many generations, the older generation and younger generation. So in perspective of the education, as you know, the hotel education, I think the VR is
Short question, please. Short.
Yeah. Yeah. So my question is, what is your opinion to accept the VR, the technology such as VR, depending on the generation?
This is actually a good question, even though it's a long question, but a good question. I mean, we utilize a lot of media richness when we measure the stimuli from VR. I was also talking to some of my friends on this media richness theory, which originally was developed in the 80s. And nowadays, there are a lot more different type of technology available. We think there's a need to revisit this theory and to incorporate the newly developed technology into the measurements or the criteria to measure the hierarchy of media richness. So again, this is a future research questions that we're investigating. And your concern about generations, I think I also I'm aware of that you know, younger generation are more digital born, and but if you think about this, the people who were born in the 80s and 90s in general, the Gen Y, they are actually grow up. They grow up in an area where, you know, the computer started to getting more and more popular, and they're also very used to, you know, sharing information contents like music sharing on Netflix. And even older generations after pandemic, we have seen a high adoption of new technology as well, because they were forced to sort of. Mm-hmm. So there's actually a great book I read recently, which was written by a Wharton Business School professor. He predict 8 trends by 2030, and which is not far from us. It's like 8 years later only. And one of the trends he was talking about, it's the senior citizens are more adapting to technology in a faster pace than what we expected. And a lot of technology innovation is actually driven by the senior market as well. So, for example, like I mentioned before, some of the VR application was driven by the need of the senior citizens, and that will also drive the future of technological development as well. So, I know young people feel about.
We have a few more questions from students. Any other?
I have a question. It's related to the research model 1, with the marrying the video and the VR and the pad, the model. My question is, in that video, I think I heard there's some kind of like script from your graduate student, like explaining something. Was it like related to environmental issues? Like all right. Then my question is, so is watching video with explanation about the environmental issue, it's not very different from just like watching like YouTube, but you use the equipment for immersing into the ocean environment. So have you considered about the comparison between just giving the information with the video and the explanation and using VR equipment, like comparison between that effect on the like causing the emotions on the pet model?
Yes, it could be done. There's also some of the researchers that when they conduct VR study, they use Google Cardboard, which relatively is cheaper, and also the argument is that you can use your smartphone and put it into the Google Cardboards, and that would be more available to general public if you want to actually do sustainability education. But I think there's a trade-off, and you can definitely study this differential effects between VR and video, and that's actually what the following study for the second research project presented, right?
All right.
Okay, sorry, Kang Soo-jung, we have another question from her. Okay.
Okay, Professor Liz, thank you for giving an insightful presentation. I have one question. It's about your opinion in terms of behavioral outcome in online experiences, because I was watching your video and just come up this kind of question, like, we pick up the apple because we might be hungry, and presenting same situation on the game. When user pick up the apple, and the game developer will give some credits or increase their health point or something, it's like there could be a behavior outcomes. So maybe many of travelers will feel the same things, like feel a little bit weird between the real experiences and online experiences. So how we can decreasing this kind of experiential gap, or I think is quite important to understand about online behavior mechanism. So I would like to ask you about your question, your opinion.
Do you mean that you want to encourage a certain kind of behavior in a virtual environment?
Yes.
I think there's a totally different theories about that on gamification, where if you want to engage people's behavior or enhance people's behavior also through a gaming setting. For example, like you mentioned, if you pick up the object, it will provide points. Most of what we're heading toward too, I mean, if you're thinking from the perspective of metaverse, it's we do not want to give objective to people. It's a platform that provides a virtual environment, but what you want to do on this virtual platform, it's depending on you. And in my study, obviously I have very clear objective. I want to test whether training will work or marketing will work. But I think it all depending on what is the ultimate objective of your content creation. And then you decide how to incentivize what kind of behavior and how to incentivize what kind of behavior, and that relates to the whole theory of gamification that we didn't talk about. And I also have a research project about gamification as well, and we're writing up that paper. If you're interested, we can talk about it privately, maybe.
Iris, you can address that issue next session. Okay, I want to collaborate with you about this AR setting and application through the Professor Kim Jin-young. Okay, next
sure.
Talking about. Thank you very much for today lecture from Taiwan, Zhu Wei Louis. Iris. Okay, we have learned from you a lot. Thank you very much. Okay. 학생 여러분. Thank you.
Bye, Jean.
Bye.
Stay healthy and stay safe.
민텐진.
Thank you.
학생 여러분, 제가 연구하는 메타버스, I will conduct a research question about the metaverse. This is time important, and you will learn from this questionnaire how we conduct metaverse research. Okay, and how this is going to be the top tier level journals. Okay, let me sharing the questionnaire, and instructor Professor Shin Sung-won.
Yes.
Please instructing the questionnaire to our students.
Yes. First of all, I should let them know a few points before the survey. First of all, thank you very much for your contribution in advance. This survey is targeting the people who can speak Korean. So if you are not met if you do not meet that condition, you can just disregard this survey. So from now on, I will speak Korean because this survey is for so people can speak Korean. 예, 감사합니다. 예, 우선 이 서베이 참석해 주셔서 감사하고요. 부 교수님 말씀하신 것처럼 메타버스에 관련된 서베이인데 간단합니다. 5분 이내로 끝날 거고 그 그룹마다 좀 다르게 서베이가 진행이 되기 때문에 어떤 분들은 메타버스를 해야 되는 분도 있고 어떤 분들은 그냥 영상만 보고 설문에 답을 하실 경우도 있으실 거예요. 그래서 그걸 감안해 주시면 좋을 것 같고 마지막에 이름, 학과, 학번 이렇게 여쭤보는데 그거는 서베이 이 설문조사 참여해 주신 거에 대해서 좀 어느 정도 보상을 드린다고 제가 들었거든요. 아마 학교 커피 쿠폰이 하나 발급이 될 텐데 그걸 위해서 제가 필요한 정보니까 제공해 주시면 감사하도록 하겠습니다. 그래서 편하신 방법으로 참여를 해주시면 되는데요. 컴퓨터로도 가능하고 스마트폰으로도 가능합니다. 컴퓨터로는 제가 지금 챗에 한 링크를 공유를 했어요. 그걸 클릭하시면 바로 설문으로 연결이 될 거고요. 만약에 핸드폰으로 사용을 하실 것 같으면 제가 지금 QR코드를 공유를 할 테니까 그 QR코드를 사용해서 스마트폰으로 설문에 참여해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 아마 QR코드가 보이실 것 같은데 이 QR코드를 사용해서 설문을 해주시면 감사하도록 하겠습니다.
오케이, 시작하시면 되죠?
예,
저도 한번
시작하시면 됩니다.
참고로 신승훈 교수는 지금 홍콩 폴리텍에서 조교수로 근무하고 있고요. 우리 학교에서 졸업을 했습니다. 석사를 이제 저 밑에서 했고 저랑 같이 메타버스 연구를 주로 하고 있습니다. 예.
QR코드는 제가 공유를 이제 중지하도록 하겠습니다. 예, 지금 챗에 질문이 하나 올라와서 예, 스마트 관광원은 기타학과 선택해 주시고 그 텍스트 박스 안에 스마트 관광원까지 써주시면 감사하겠습니다.
제가 끝났는데 끝나면 나가도 되나요?
구철문 교수님 어떻게 답변해 주시면
네, 나가셔도 됩니다.
예, 감사합니다.
네,
수고하셨어요.
감사합니다.
네, 고생하셨습니다.
감사합니다. 혹시나 설문하시면서 조금 어색한 부분이나 이해가 안 될 것 같은 질문 같은 거는 이게 편하게 만약에 의견 있으시면 저한테 주시면 제가 업데이트하는데 도움이 될 것 같습니다. 뭐 필요한 부분에 대해서만 말씀해 주셔도 되고요. 없으면 그냥 예 말씀 안 해주셔도 됩니다.
저도 지금 실제로 설문에 참여를 해봤는데 저는 뭐 이 논문을 디자인했기 때문에 대충 이게 어떻게 갈 줄은 알지만 여러분들은 논문 디자인 안 해서 그냥 순수하게 찍고 있잖아요. 예. 어쨌든 이런 메타버스와 2D 그 유튜브하고 이 차이가 어떻게 나오는지를 좀 보려고 하는 거거든요. 그래서 하여튼 여러분들이 하시면서 들으세요. 좀 아까 그 강의하신 그 타이베이 교수도 옛날 티오리 갖고 AR, VR을 실험을 해서 서베이를 해서 이렇게 하고 있습니다. 그러니까 상황이 바뀐 거지 티오리가 바뀐 건 아니에요. 그러니까 여러분들이 시대에 발맞추거나 시대보다 앞선 연구를 해야지 그 다음에 잡이 이 오퍼튜니티가 잘 나오거든요. 예, 왜냐면 그쪽으로 돈이 떨어지니까. 오늘 제가 한국 메타버스 그 한국 정부에서 하는 돈이 그쪽으로 엄청나게 가고 있어요. 왜냐면 이미 이제 스마트 투어리즘 애플리케이션 이런 쪽은 많이 갔기 때문에. 돈이 가면 프로젝트가 많이 떨어지고 프로젝트가 떨어지면 오퍼튜니티가 많이 나오는 거죠. 그럼 사람들은 누굴 찾겠어요? 예, 이런 경험을 한 사람이나 메타버스를 실제로 디자인해 본 사람, 또 메타버스의 장점과 단점이 뭔지 아는 사람, 그 다음에 거기서 사람의 심리가 어떻게 운영이 되는지 이런 것들을 잘 알아야지 결국은 필요한 어떻게 리서처가 되는 거죠. 네. 그리고 새로운 것은 여러분도 아시다시피 사람들이 잘 몰라요. 그리고 약간 엉성해도 빨리 어떤 좋은 기회가 나올 수 있죠. 근데 예전 거는 사람들이 너무 잘 알고 잘 안다는 건 리뷰어들도 잘 안다는 거거든요. 그럼 리뷰어가 자기 아는 거 오면 세게 리뷰를 해요. 그러면 이제 위험해지는 거죠. 그래서 사실 리서처들은 프랙티컬 리서치를 이렇게 먼저 앞서서 나가는 경우도 있고 프랙티컬 케이스를 보고 리서치 아이디어를 적용해서 새로운 방식의 아이디어를 제시해 주는 경우도 있기 때문에 여러분들이 이런 연구를 액티브하게 해보시면 좋을 것 같다는 생각입니다. 다 하신 분은 나가셔도 됩니다. 그리고 제가 지금 늘품에 커피숍 있지 않습니까? 1,000원짜리 거기다 여러분들 이름을 쫙 제 이름으로 했을 테니까 여러분들이 거기서 나 설문에 참여했다고 하고 커피 한 잔을 갖고 가서 드시면 됩니다. 제가 돈은 내놓겠습니다. 2장 갖고 가시면 안 되고 한 잔. 자, 하신 분들은 이제 즐거운 주말 되시고요. 다음 주에 뵙도록 하겠습니다.
예, 마지막으로 그 방금
감사합니다.
말씀하신 그 커피 아마 제가 목록을 받아서 넘기는 시간이 조금 필요해서
네네.
이거 끝나고 바로 가시기는 힘드실 거예요. 그래서 그거 조금만 고려해 주세요.
신 교수.
예.
우리 그 TM 리젝 먹은 거 IJHM에 뭐 수정해서 내지 말고
예.
내가 낼게 그냥.
어디에 어떤 걸 어디에
IJHM의 내점에.
아, 예. 제가 근데 세팅은 다 해놨는데
아.
김태현 교수님이랑 얘기하고 수정할 부분이 몇 개 있어서 제가 지금 수정 중이거든요.
아, 그래? 아,
예.
알았어.
그래서 수정 마치는 대로
근데
말씀드리겠습니다.
IJHM이
예.
요즘 뭐 다들 그렇긴 한데 논문이 많이 쌓여갖고 내가 어사인 받는데 리뷰 어사인 받는데 2달 걸렸어. 뭐 모르겠지만 논문에 따라 틀려질 수도 있는데
예.
오래 걸리더라고.
예. 빨리 수정하겠습니다. 금방 합니다. 거의 다 했습니다.
그나저나 TM은 그거 살릴 수도 있는 논문인데 죽이냐. 리뷰 리젝 나온 것도 아니고 물론 리비전하기가 까다롭게 여기 나오긴 하지만.
예, 근데 뭐 괜찮은 코멘트가 있어서 그것만 좀 수정하면 될 것 같아가지고요.
그러니까 아쉬워. 캐시한테 더 로비를 했어야 돼요. 아이고.
교수님, 제가 오늘 오후 세미나는 학교 일정 때문에 아마 참석이 힘들 것 같습니다.
오케이.
업데이트된 건 특별히 없고 지금 서베이 연구원분들하고 조금씩 진행해 주셔서 데이터 지금 모으고 있거든요. 그래서 아마 다음 주까지는 첫 번째 스터디 연구는 분석까지 보여드릴 수 있을 것 같습니다.
오늘 그 발표한 그 아이리스 그 타이완 교수 슬라이드 그 리서치 모델을 보니까 이 교수가 theoretical 베이스는 좀 약한 것 같아. 근데 애플리케이션은 잘 만들었더라고 보니까 호텔에서 부킹하는 거나 이런 것들을 AR로 실제로 만들어 놨어 쫙. 그런데 그걸 테스트하는데 theoretical 그건 좀 약해서 media richness theory를 쓰는데 뭐 그걸 써도 상관없는데 변수나 컨텍스트가 이렇게 좀 깊게 들어가 있지는 않더라고. 근데 그런 애플리케이션을 우리가 이제 사용해서 데이터 컬렉션을 할 수 있다면 또 빨리 논문 하나 쓸 수는 있을 것 같다는 생각 들긴 해. 못 봤지 그거?
끝에 조금 봤는데 그 교수님께서 직접 만드신 건가요?
그건 아닐 것 같고 어떻게 교수가 그걸 직접 만들겠어? 하여튼 뭐 내가 물어볼게 한번. 어떻게 생각해?
예, 뭐 AR 같은 경우는 뭐 그런 플랫폼만 갖고 있으면은 할 수 있는 건 뭐 많으니까. 저는 뭐
그래도 요즘 그 정도 플랫폼을 가지고 실제 타스크하고 비슷하게 만들어 놓은 거를 가지고 실험할 수 있다면 그거 괜찮을 것 같은데?
예. 뭐 AR 쪽은 제가 알고 있는 선에서는 간단해서는 이제는 거의 안 될 것 같고 아까 근데 말씀하시는 거 보니까 되게 디테일한 태스크를 학생들한테 주고 하시는 거 보니까 충분히 뭐 전 좋을 것 같습니다. 언제든.
아까 난 그 연구 발표한 것 중에 그 친구가 한 것 중에 그 스멜 갖다가 테스트하기 위해서 우리가 스멜이 없잖아.